All right, we got a big night, a really big night ahead. I'm gonna display some slides. I'm gonna read some slides. I'm gonna talk about some stuff. This is where the rubber hits the road, man. This is where it all comes together. You've been working ELEC 110 all to get up to this point. Before we jump into chapter 16, I want to review a little bit, just very briefly, what we talked about last chapter, because it's very, very critical. If we understand the last chapter well, it's going to make this chapter go really, really fast. Okay? The big thing you got to remember about last chapter. Remember that? Ice. In a capacitive circuit, in an AC capacitive circuit, current I leads E. I know I start to sound like some kind of an English teacher or grammar or whatever. I never understood what the heck they're talking about. I before E unless after, whatever the heck it was. I have no idea what you're talking about. You know. You understand what I'm talking about here, though? In the word ice, the letter I comes before the letter E. I, in electronics, we use the letter I to represent current, and we use the letter E to represent voltage. So what we're talking about here, what am I talking about? Leading, lagging, what am I talking about here? What's taking place in a capacitive AC circuit? Phase shift, right? How much phase shift do I get in a purely capacitive circuit? 90 degrees. Why is it 90? Why isn't it 87? Why isn't it 102? 90. Perfectly 90 degrees. Well, you always get 90 degrees of phase shift in a purely capacitive circuit.
One's at its peak, the other's at zero. Vice versa.
But why is that? You're right there at the answer. You just got to give it to me. Why is it always 90 degrees? 90 degrees. What's happening every 90 degrees? For the first 90, we're increasing. The next 90, we're decreasing back to zero. The next 90, we're increasing in the opposite direction. The next 90, we're decreasing back to zero. So with a sinusoidal waveform applied to a capacitor, every 90 degrees things are changing. That's why phase shift will always be, in a purely capacitive circuit, exactly 90 degrees, period. Make sense? So when that sine wave is increasing 0 to 90, that capacitor is going to try to charge, isn't it? When it's going down from 100% down to 0%, it's going to try to discharge. When it's going from 180 to 270, it's going to try to charge, but in the opposite direction. Then when it's between 270 and 360, it's going to be discharging. So there's always going to be that lag, the lag of voltage. Current's going to be instantaneous. Alternating current, instantaneous. Make sense? Get some blank stares out there. Kind of concerns me a little bit. I know it's a 3-day weekend and all, but comprende? Okay, we're not going to talk about time constants when we apply AC to it, because that would drive us insane, and I don't want anybody to go insane. What we're going to do is talk about the overall effect that this capacitor has inside an AC circuit. We're going to call that property X sub C. Capacitive reactance. X is reactance, C is capacitive reactance. Okay? Real easy formula. 1 over 2 pi FC. 1 is the number 1. It's the first number in the alphabet. Right? 2 is the number 2. It means not 1, but the second number in the alphabet. Pi, mathematical constant for dealing with the circumference of a circle. 2 pi because we're dealing with two alternations, positive alternation, negative alternation, two alternations of a sine wave, times the frequency times the capacitance. Now the interesting thing here, remember last week we talked about the F and C? Those are the only two variables we have here. The 1 over 2 pi, that's not going to change. The F and C, they could change. Frequency could increase, frequency could decrease. Capacitance could increase, capacitance could decrease. So the interesting thing is no matter what we do to the F and C, the opposite is going to be felt at X sub C. So we call this an inversely proportional relationship. If frequency increases, X sub C decreases. If frequency decreases, X sub C increases. Whatever takes place here, the opposite's going to take place there. Remember that? Okay? So this is the important stuff. This is the important stuff. The book has got a lot of words in it. It's got pictures. It's got diagrams, right? My slides have got a lot of words, kind of use it as a guide to keep me on track and what we're talking about here. And basically it follows the objectives of the book. The stuff that I'm lecturing in, these are absolutes. These are absolutes. You've got to be able to describe this action the same way that I'm describing this action. You follow what I'm saying? Because this is the kind of stuff you're going to be asked in a job interview. Describe the attributes of a capacitive AC circuit. This is what they're looking for. Current leads voltage, 90 degrees of phase shift. X sub C is 1 over 2 pi FC. If frequency increases, X sub C decreases. If frequency decreases, X sub C increases. I mean, just this, just this. You know how many quiz questions I could generate from just this on the board? I'm probably good for about 75 or 80 questions that I could ask you just on what I put up on the board here. Real easy. If you know this, real easy. If you forget this, then you're in a pickle. What's up?
Are F and C proportional to each other? So if F goes up, will C go up too? Or can
No, you could have the same value. It's a good question. If you go to Radio Shack and buy a capacitor, you could have that value of capacitor. You apply a high frequency to it, right? A high frequency. High frequency means low X sub C. Low X sub C means it's going to act like a short circuit. You apply a high frequency to it. High frequency, low X sub C, low frequency, high X sub C, it's going to act like an open. So that same capacitor, that exact same capacitor could act like an open in a circuit or it can act like a short. The variable is frequency. Because let's face it, out of these things here, right, typically 1, 2, 3 of these are going to be engraved in stone. 3 of these are going to be engraved in stone. 1 of them only is going to be that variable. Make sense? It depends what you're working on. If you're working on a radio transmitter, that frequency is probably going to be locked in because the FCC says it's going to be locked in. So, you know, if you work for Cairo, 7:10 a.m., that frequency you broadcast at is kind of an absolute. So there, the only thing that you can play with is going to be your value of C. If you're tuning a radio, then you want F to be able to vary. You want F to be able to vary. So you may need to have a capacitor that you could tune to create this value of F to be able to move. Make sense? Okay, so those are our variables. Let's jump to chapter 16 now, inductive AC circuits. After completing this chapter, you're going to be able to describe the phase relationship between current and voltage in an inductive AC circuit, determine the inductive reactance in an AC circuit, explain impedance and its effect on inductive circuits. Describe how an inductor resistor network can be used for filtering phase shift. Explain how a low pass and a high pass inductive circuit operate. I can actually do that real quick. They operate quite well. Thank you. So we got that out of the way. All right, inductance in AC circuits. Inductors, as you know, offer opposition to current flow or change in current. That's what an inductor is all about. That's what an inductor is all about. It tries to prevent a change in current. It tries to help keep current stable. Okay? I believe in God, and God has a sense of humor. Actually, this weekend I had the opportunity to work on an inductor. A friend of mine owns a coffee shop, and in their display case for pastries, I thought they needed help eating the pastries. They just needed help illuminating the pastries. There's a fluorescent tube. And in the fluorescent tube, the way that those things work is there's a starter circuit and then there's an inductor. The inductor typically is what we call the ballast. And what happens is you light that gas, you ionize the gas, and then that inductor tries to prevent a change in the value of current to keep that fluorescent tube ionized, the gas ionized, and keep that at a constant level. Anyway, it wasn't working properly, and make a long story short, they actually, my friend ordered from the company, they sent a replacement, and it was a new solid state ballast. So that allowed me to remove the inductor, that, you know, that little starter thing that, you know, you put on fluorescent lights, all of that got cut out. So it was just a matter of me wiring that in directly, throw the switch, pow, let there be light on the pastries. I was offered pastries. I actually declined the pastries. But that inductor, I can't believe I left that behind, because she ended up just throwing it in the garbage. Should have brought it in, because it was perfect inductor. That's all it is. And anyone in the industry would call it a ballast for fluorescent light, but in essence it was just nothing more than an inductor. Now, inductors offer opposition to current flow. Voltage placed across an inductor creates a magnetic field. Okay, you put current through that, you create a magnetic field. When AC voltage changes polarity, it causes the magnetic field to expand and then collapse. Voltage is induced in the inductor coil called a counter electromotive force, or CEMF. Remember Lenz's law, right? Lenz's law says what goes up must come down, right? Now, what did Lenz's law say? Basically what Lenz says is current going in that direction creates a magnetic field like this. When you shut that circuit off, the magnetic field is going to collapse into the conductor of which it originally was created. When magnetic field collapses into a conductor, what does it do? It induces current. It's like a generator action. Just like a generator, just like what's going on over at Grand Coulee Dam right now. That magnetic field is moving, collapsing into the conductor, and then it creates a counter current, opposite of the force that created it. That's, in essence, Lenz's law. Not what goes up must come down, but if current going that way create a magnetic field going like this, a magnetic field going like this is going to create a current going that way. We call that CEMF, counter electromotive force. Back in the day, nobody ever even asked me about this, the letter E. I don't know if you realize this, but the letter E that you've been using, and I say you could use an E or you could use a V, I really don't care what you use in this class. I know what you're talking about. But you know, originally, old school, the letter E was used because you know what the letter E stands for? EMF, electromotive force. CEMF is like counter voltage, if you will. If voltage created current going that way, CEMF is going to create a counter voltage going that way. So I got 5 going in that direction, I got 4 coming back in this direction. 5 minus 4 equals 1 in that direction. And it's that simple. That's how these inductors work. Now the big thing to remember about AC is alternating current. 60 hertz. 60 hertz that's coming out of our wall here in North America goes positive alternations 60 times a second. There are 60 negative alternations per second of what's coming out of that wall. So you've got a magnetic field that's expanding and then collapsing, pushing back in. Changing direction. 60 positive alternations, 60 negative alternations. That's 120 changes per second. AC in an inductor, CEMF. Make sense? Now CEMF will always be 180 degrees out of phase with the applied voltage. Not 90 degrees, 180 degrees. Because we're talking about what? Lenz's law. CEMF is always opposite of the force that created it. It opposes the applied voltage. Because again, Lenz was right. It's Lenz's law. It's not Lenz's notion. It's not Lenz's idea. Lenz's idea. If you're from the Northeast, Lenz's idea. Have you talked to your students about Lenz's idea? No, I haven't. Lenz's law. Opposition is as effective in reducing current flow as a resistor. Doesn't that make sense? If I got voltage going this way and it creates that magnetic field, when the magnetic field collapses, it creates that countercurrent. It reduces the flow of current. Is as effective as a resistor. But there's something unique about using an inductor. Say that?
Does not consume power.
Exactly. Does not consume power. These are reactive components. Resistive components dissipated as heat. On a cold day, nothing like warming up by some resistors as they dissipate heat. Who's paying for that? We're all paying for that. If we're converting electric current into heat, typically that's not what we have resistors and circuits for. So by using an inductor, we gain back all that efficiency and we prevent the change in current. So an inductor makes a lot more sense in a lot of circuits. It's one of the reasons we use inductors. Now this is what it would look like if you had an oscilloscope and you could look at the counter EMF, the counter voltage. Here we see in blue the applied voltage. There's our applied voltage. And if Lenz's law holds true, then we should be getting an induced voltage, the opposite of which created it. Now, if I could like, can I like pick this up and like if I could fold this over somehow? No, that won't work. You understand what I'm trying to do? If I could fold this in half, if I could actually fold this in half and algebraically cancel these two, well, I just kind of gave my answer away. What would these two do to each other?
Cancel.
They'd cancel each other. They'd algebraically cancel each other out. This would hold true if an inductor was 100% efficient. Is anything we've talked about since the beginning of this program 100% efficient in electronics? No. So what do you suppose here? What do you reckon? What do you reckon? Which line here is going to be a little bit more stout and which one's going to be a little bit less?
The applied voltage stronger or stout?
Yeah, the applied voltage is going to be a little bit stronger. If there was 100% efficiency, the induced voltage would equal this, but it's not. Why isn't an inductor 100% efficient? Real easy answer. You know the answer, you just don't know you know the answer.
This material has resistance.
What material has resistance?
The conductor.
What conductor?
Whatever's used.
The coil, yeah. The coil's made out of wire. Wire has resistance. So to make an inductor, you've got resistance in the equation. We don't want it there, so in a class environment like this, theoretically perfect world, now the coil has no resistance. The coil is, it's 100% efficient, and this is what's going to take place. In the world of reality, a coil is made of wire. Wire has resistance. Resistance is going to mean that this induced voltage. The other thing, too, is coupling. With that magnetic field, I mean, Lenz is right. Lenz's law is right. I'm not going to dispute Lenz. He's not here to defend himself, okay? That'd be a hoot, huh? Battle of the Knotheads. 1995 in the Lake Washington Technical College Auditorium. Joe Grunick versus Lenz. I don't think I'd do too well against Lenz. Watt, on the other hand, maybe. Right? But because an inductor is not 100% efficient, we're not going to get this where it's going to be totally cancel each other out. So if we algebraically add it up, we're going to see blue here, a little thin blue line, a little hump there, right? And then we're going to see a little thin blue line down here because it's not 100% efficient. But doggone it, this is pretty effective in opposing that change, isn't it? It's pretty effective. Again, in a theory class like this, how effective? 100% effective. In the world of reality in the lab, no, it's not effective. Now the overall effect that this is going to have between voltage and current when we apply AC to an inductor is going to be this. When I first close a switch, when I put an inductor in a series circuit and first close the switch, voltage is going to go from 0 to 100% in the first 90 degrees. Can you dig it? Make sense? As soon as I get up to 100% with voltage, what's current going to be at? 0. Because current's going to be doing what? The inductor is going to be fighting a change in current. It's going to be fighting a change in current. Here, what's happening? I'm going from 90 degrees to 0. What's happening to my magnetic field? Collapsing. And when it collapses, what's it creating? Counter current. So actually what we're doing here is now we're inducing a current into the circuit. That's what we're doing here. Now we're reversing direction. I'm going from 180 to 270. I'm increasing negative. What's current going to do? Try to stay the same, try to stay the same, try to stay the same, and it can't. Eventually it's going to go down to 0. So what we end up with is no longer ice with a circuit like this. We have ELEC. ELEC. And actually the phrase that pays, if you want to pay attention to these sorts of things, ELEC, the ice, we used to call it ELEC the Iceman. That used to be the phrase that pays. But of course this is politically incorrect. ELEC the ice person need to be sexually gender neutral or whatever. So ELEC the ice person, remember that. ELEC in an inductive circuit, voltage leads current. Is this an inductive circuit? Yep. What's voltage doing? Voltage is leading current by 90 degrees. When voltage is at 90, current's at 0. When voltage is at 180, current's at 90. When voltage is at 270, current is at 180. When voltage is at 360, current's at 270. So it's constantly lagging. Current is constantly lagging, or we could say voltage is leading. Anybody want to take a wild guess by how many degrees? And why is it 90 degrees? Why isn't it 87? Why isn't it 103? And the sine wave changes direction every 90 degrees. That's the real reason. When you play AC to it, the sine wave changes direction every 90 degrees. Make sense? Now, inductive reactance. This is a good thing. This is the opposition offered to current flow by an inductor. The good news is it's measured in ohms. You guys know everything there is. You guys, you persons know everything there is to know. You guys, you're all guys. All y'all, getting ready for CanSat, Texas CanSat, all y'all, is measured in ohms. You guys know about dealing with ohms, right? Can you add ohms up in series? Can you add ohms up in parallel? Can you add ohms up in complex? Yeah, that's why we had you do that early in the quarter. We didn't do it because I had nothing better to do with my time. We had you do that so that now, if we give you ohms, you know, you can slice them, dice them, do whatever you got to do with them. Now, this inductive reactance depends on its inductance and the frequency of the applied voltage. It's going to be expressed by the symbol X sub L. And this formula, believe it or not, is even easier than the last formula. X sub L is equal to 2 pi FL. You don't even have to do a reciprocal on this one. The number 2, it means not 1, it means 2. 2 what? 2 pi, which represents that we're dealing with not one alternation, but we're dealing with both alternations, or the entire cycle of a sinusoidal waveform. The positive alternation would be 1 pi. The second pi is the negative alternation. So this tells me we're dealing with the whole enchilada, the whole sinusoidal waveform. 2 pi, 2 times pi times f, the frequency in hertz, times L, the inductance in henries. So again, be careful when you're entering this in your scientific calculation device, your calculator, right? 2, that's easy, you can't mess up that one. Pi, you got to key in your calculator. F, typically your frequency is going to be in hertz, kilohertz, megahertz, maybe gigahertz. Inductance measured in henries, the typical values you're going to be using in electronics are going to be millihenries times 10 to the negative third, microhenries times 10 to the negative sixth. But on a quiz, on an exam, I could give you anything here. I could give you 3 henries. You may not see 3 henries typically in electronics, microelectronics environment, but I certainly may give you 3 henries as a question to see if mathematically you can interpret that. Actually, I'm pretty sure you could deal with the 3 henries. That one would be easy. It'd be 3 microhenries that you got to make sure you're equipped in dealing with. Applications for inductive circuits. Inductors are widely used in electronics. They compete with capacitors for filtering and phase shift applications. Engineers are always going to weigh which component they want to use. Can we use a capacitor to do this? Can we use an inductor to use this? Unfortunately, inductors have fewer applications than capacitors because they're larger. Typically, they get the amount of effect we need. We have to have a pretty big inductor. They're heavier, and obviously with microelectronics, heavy is not really popular. And they're really more expensive because they're going to be made out of wire. They have to be wound. Capacitor, 2 plates separated by a dielectric material. You know, dip it in ceramic. Hey, look at this. I got myself a capacitor. An inductor. I've had students that have graduated this program and gone to work in audio type applications or RF applications. They had to roll their own. Roll their own. So obviously that's labor intensive. A company would rather just, an engineer would say, hey, boy, you can get these capacitors, 150 in a little baggie and, install them in a circuit. Instead of paying you as a technician, not an assembler, as a technician to sit there and be rolling your own inductor to put it in an RF circuit. It's still the cheapest way out for some applications. Inductors provide a reactive effect while still completing a DC circuit path. Capacitors provide a reactive effect but block the DC elements. You think about that? If the frequency is really, really low, like how low can you go like DC? X sub L is going to be really, really, really low, like non-existent. If you apply DC to an inductor, if you were an electron, a DC electron, you'd be like, what is the deal with this curly piece of wire? On the other hand, if you come in as a high frequency, you're going to come in and you're going to see, holy cow, I got to go through this curly piece of wire and build up this huge magnetic field, and there's this opposition, this CEMF, and I'm doomed for failure. I'm never going to make it through the circuit. And that's exactly what it's like an electron trying to make it through a circuit at a high frequency. The higher the frequency, the harder the journey. Even go higher in frequency, it makes it even worse. Go lower in frequency, an inductor becomes a piece of curly wire, plain and simple. Inductors and capacitors are sometimes combined to improve the performance of a circuit. Sometimes an engineer will combine and use capacitors because of certain attributes and inductors and use them both in a circuit because of their positive attributes. Series RL circuits are used as high and low pass filters. What kind of a circuit is this? An AC series RL circuit. Can you all see this? This is really the circuit right here. One of the things, this book is not, I don't necessarily think this book is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's better than the book that I wrote for this course.
I doubt that. If you wrote a book for this course, I'll bet you'd be better than this one.
Truth be told, I actually was a consultant to him on this book.
Really?
One of the early editions, I actually had a segment that I was hired as a ghostwriter to write in the center of this book. They finally dropped it, but there were actually, I'll show you an old edition. There was actually pictures of me in a bunny suit in this book.
We would like to see that.
They dropped it because they offended people. So, oh man, this is a creepy looking dude, man. I'll try to, I think I got an old version of that laying around. But anyway, there's some aspects about this book that I really like. One of the aspects that I do like is they do draw the circuits differently. And the important thing is, some textbooks, they use like the same graphic program for drawing all their circuits, and then you begin to think that a series RC circuit looks a certain way. And you get used to that, and then you get out into industry, and the first day on the job, your boss is like, what kind of a circuit is it? You don't even make it your first day on the job because you go through an interview, they say, what kind of circuit is this? I don't know, I've never seen this before. Okay? Now, look and see if the circuit is a series circuit. The first thing is the type of power source, AC series RL circuit. When I take my output across the, what arrangement is this? What am I taking my output across the, what resistor? Parallel, thank you. You're taking the output in parallel, not series. This is in series with the inductor, but you're taking the output in parallel across the output of the resistor. When you do that, this is what we call a low pass filter. Remember last week, let me draw that circuit again. Remember the circuit that I had drawn up on the board? Like the universal circuit? Yeah, Joe, we remember. That circuit changed our life. I took a picture on my smartphone and I blew it up at Walmart this weekend into a poster size. That was such an impressive freaking diagram that you done drawing last week for us. Remember that? AC, series, R, L, circuit. If it's AC, there's going to be two parts to AC. What are the two parts? Voltage, frequency. Absolutely. Have to have these two parts. Okay? If it's a resistor, it's measured in ohms. If it's an inductor, it's measured in henries that we need to convert to ohms with what formula? Thank you. F. FL. It's an inductor, remember? Right formula, wrong formula, right? F and C. Now, you've got a couple different combinations here that we could take. We could take output across our resistor. We could take output across our inductor. Right? I've got A, B, C. Or I could go across AC. If I go across AC, I'm actually reading source. If I go across AB, I'm measuring across the parallel resistor. If I measure across BC, I'm measuring across the parallel inductance. Make sense? Okay. Now, I do this on scrap paper. When I take a quiz like this or an exam, I do this on scratch paper. Because I get twisting around easy. I really do. Okay? Frequency, amplitude. If I put in a low frequency amplitude at 100%, okay? Low frequency means low reactance. Very good. Okay? That means that in ohms, this is measured in ohms, right? X sub L, and this is R, which is also measured in ohms. X sub L is going to be low, which means my entire voltage drop is going to be across what? Why is my entire voltage drop going to be across the resistor? Because this is a, what kind of a circuit? Voltage divider. Thank you. It's a series circuit. Series circuit is also known as, AKA, you like watching those crime shows? Right? AKA, also known as. I want an alias. Maybe I don't want an alias. So if this is low ohms, is there going to be any voltage drop across my inductor? Very little. Is there going to be a voltage drop across my resistor? Yeah. So at a or at a low frequency, I'm going to draw that same plot here, frequency, amplitude. Okay, same thing here, frequency, amplitude. I'm going to get a very low voltage drop here, and I'm going to get a very high voltage drop here. As a matter of fact, 100% of my voltage drop is going to be across this resistor at a low frequency. Because at a low frequency, this is going to look like a piece of curly wire. Not twisted wire, curly wire. Curly fries. Want regular fries or curly fries with that? You always got to upgrade to the curly fries. So there is a difference. Okay, so this is going to be low, this is going to be high. Make sense? Now let's put in a high frequency. When I put in a high frequency, X sub L is going to be high. Measured in ohms. That means I'm going to get what kind of a voltage drop across my inductor? A big voltage drop across it. If I got a big voltage drop here, what kind of a voltage drop am I going to have across my resistor? Why? Because this is a series circuit, and a series circuit is also known as a voltage divider. Make sense? Let's put in a frequency that's not too high, not too low, that's just right. Medium. You put in a medium frequency means medium X sub L. Medium X sub L means medium voltage drop. If I got a medium voltage drop here, the remaining voltage is also going to be medium here. Okay? You plot all of these out, and you kind of end up with something that kind of looks like this. So when I take the output across my parallel resistor, what am I passing here? What group of frequencies am I passing? Very good. I could call this a low frequency pass filter. Also known as a high frequency reject filter. Same thing. Same thing. What kind of a filter is this? High frequency reject filter. That's answer A. Answer B is a low pass filter. Answer C is both A and B above. Answer D is none of the above. Read the questions. Read all the answers. These two things are the same. And I've seen them listed the same. It just depends on whose book you're reading, whose manual you're reading. Make sense? If I take the output across the inductor, what's going on here? This is actually what? A high pass frequency, aka, very good, low frequency reject filter. Same thing. Make sense? So no matter how they draw on a diagram or on a schematic, don't get freaked out about it. Just look at what components are in series, where's the output taken across, and then figure it out on your own. You can't memorize this stuff. If you try memorizing this, you're not going to do well in this program. You got to learn it. And if learning it means scribbling this stuff down on a piece of scratch paper to answer the question, that's cool. It really is. I've interviewed a lot of faculty, potential faculty members here, and if I ask them a question like this and they got to scribble this down and they come up with the right answer, that's cool. There's no harm in that. Start asking people and they can answer this stuff off the top of their head, then it's kind of like, well, let's see if you really know your stuff. You know, get them in the lab, and they don't know what to do. So it's okay. The frequency above or below the frequencies passed or attenuated, that's your $1 million word, attenuated, right? Attenuate is the opposite of amplify. It's called the cutoff frequency. And the symbol that we use is FCO, frequency of cutoff. This can be determined by the formula. This program doesn't like these fonts, all these fonts sometimes. It gives me goofy. This should be FCO right here. Frequency of cutoff is the amount of resistance of the circuit divided by 2 pi FL. And that cutoff frequency that we're talking about Remember this 100% right here? Frequency of cutoff is actually going to occur where?
70.7%.
Very good, right there at 70.7%. So, if for an application you want to move this, you want to move this left, you want to move it right, the way you're really going to be able to do that with this application here is going to be with that value of R. And in later classes, in the more advanced classes, you're going to learn that actually that value of R factors in with something that's called quality. Don't take notes on this, it's beyond the scope of what you're learning right now. And it's quality factor, and it's how much resistance is there in the component as compared to how much reactance is there inside the component. And engineers have to trade that off to get that zeroed in on just the right value. This is a problem this is a problem that a friend of mine had several years ago while trying to get enhanced reception on her cable television. That to get that cutoff frequency just right, that quality factor needed to be just so. And replicating that in a garage, selecting the right gauge of wire, the right amount of resistance, to get the right amount of inductance. There were trade-offs that needed to be made. And eventually, from what I understand, is it only took like 3 turns of wire to get enough reactance to be able to help clarify an image, a twisted image on the screen. This individual was only trying to help out the cable company, realizing how overburdened they were with service calls. Instead of having them come out and fix the reception, this person, because she had an extended background in electronics, just decided to take it upon themselves to rectify the situation. I would not ever endorse this. Because again, if you get caught, it's a serious freaking legal battle. Have I ever told you a story about me? And the charges that were levied against me? I'll tell you the story someday. Not a pleasant. I was actually accused by the United States government of satellite piracy. Satellite piracy, real serious. And it was basically DirecTV that was coming after me, and they went to the government, and it became a real ugly situation. And I'll never forget that day, you know, like everybody knows like where they were when like Kennedy was assassinated, and everybody knows where they were on 9/11. I knew exactly where I was. I was at my mailbox, and there was a big freaking envelope in there, you know, and it was like, I opened that up, and it's kind of like, whoa, this is serious. Then the certified letters started coming. We got to start going to the post office and signing for stuff. Not a pleasant experience. So I had to defend my my innocence, and it cost thousands of dollars, thousands upon thousands of dollars to do it. Do I know how to do it? Absolutely. The Navy made it a point to train me how to do it. Okay. Was I doing it? If I was doing it, why was I a paid subscriber to DirecTV? So anyway, it was findings were in my favor, but if you think you're innocent until proven guilty in this country, bzz, wrong answer. If you're accused of something, you got to prove your innocence, and that's going to cost some money. It's going to cost some money, and it's not your every you know, you don't go get Vern Funk as your attorney. Okay, you got to get a high-tech attorney that knows what the deal is. And I actually had an attorney at the time that I was working with my airplane crash, and I thought that my attorney could just like write a letter and make the whole thing go away. When I showed her a copy, she said, well, I got to look into this. You know, you just wait here. I was waiting in a conference room. She disappeared for like 45 minutes. She came back and she's all wide-eyed. She's like, this is beyond the scope of what I could deal with. You need a different attorney. I'm like, ugh. Yeah, they had all kinds of stuff. Digital Millennium Copyright Act they were levying against me. The Patriot Act. I was anti-patriotic because I was trying to commandeer our satellites for my own personal use and the use of Al-Qaeda. Can't even spell Al-Qaeda. I don't know what the heck you're talking about. Stealing satellite signals, which isn't all that difficult. Well, I was paying for DirecTV. And you know what? I'm still a subscriber to DirecTV, even though they came after me. It's like it's a superior signal. It's the real deal, man. Why do I want to go to Dish when I'm happy with that, even though you all sued me, you know? It's typically one hand not knowing what the other's doing. You know, it's a good product and all, and just as a matter of principle. Actually, my attorney thought I was freaking nuts. She's like, so have you dumped DirecTV? No, it's a good quality signal. I like their product. You gotta be kidding.
Better than Dish Network?
As far as programming,
Is there any difference?
no, as far as programming, no. But DirecTV infrastructure, I'm very familiar with. Their satellite orbits, I'm very familiar. I have a friend who's I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of my thing. I better shut up while I'm ahead. You got to beep all of this out of my recordings. Beep all of this out. Hey, the bottom line, though, is we kid around about that kind of stuff, and integrity issues, when you learn more about electronics, the more you learn about electronics, you're going to learn there's a lot of hacks that are available and stuff. You really got to look at the ethics about it. And although I kind of, with a tongue-in-cheek, I kid around about it, serious business. It's very, very, very serious business. If I wanted to go out and jam police radar, I'd know how to do it. If I wanted to jam police laser. Actually, a guy out of this program came through this program, graduated. He went to go to work for a company that made laser jammers. They were located up by Payne Field. And for him, it was a dream job because he was a gearhead. And he was getting sent to all these car shows all over the nation representing their laser jammer. And I used to go, I got him in as an intern, so I'd go up there and visit him as an intern. And it was cool. On the shelf, they'd go out and they'd buy the police laser units, the exact same models, and then go out in their back parking lot and try to defeat it and try to, this is the XJ12, F, Model F, and, this is how we got it. And the funny thing about laser jamming is one of the owners of the company was actually an attorney. And laser radar is controlled by the Federal Communications Commission, FCC. Laser is controlled by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, because it's light. And there's nothing wrong with jamming a laser signal. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. I mean, the police might not dig it, if you're driving by. And actually, they were really good, too. They would only give you, I think, like 3-4 seconds of jamming. So if you're like flying down a freaking back road and, there's a bunch of kids that just got off a school bus and, the cop is there and he pulls the trigger, that they're only going to jam you for like 3 seconds, allow you time to slow down and give you fair warning. And they did that for liability purposes. They want you to slow down. You're being painted with laser, slow down, modify your behavior, and don't get the ticket. Not defeat the police and keep going. That's not what it was all about. So it's kind of interesting, but like I say, there's an ethics side of it that we'll talk about in the future, especially as you get more proficient in these things. So we talked about these components of the formula, FCO, R, pi, F, and L. In summary, in a pure inductive circuit, the current lags the applied voltage by 90 degrees. Inductive reactance is the opposition to current flow offered by an inductor in an AC circuit. The symbol we use is X sub L. It's measured in ohms, and the formula is X sub L equals 2 pi FL. Impedance, we're going to talk about impedance next chapter. It's more appropriate that we talk about impedance next chapter. And what impedance is the combination. What's resistance measured in? What's reactance measured in? All ohms are not created equal. Impedance is measured in ohms, and it's a combination of resistance and reactive ohms. Make sense? We're going to talk about that next chapter. And then finally, we talked about RL circuits used for high-pass filters, low-pass filters. If you can't remember it, don't remember it. Just know how to do this. And really, what does this whole chapter boil down to? ELI and X sub L equals 2 pi FL. If you know ELI and you know 2 pi FL, what can I ask you? I could put them in circuits that are in series. I could take the output in parallel. What else can I do? There's really not a whole lot more I could do to you. Because I know you think I'm up here trying to do stuff to you. Give you wicked, crazy quiz questions and make you suffer before 3-day weekends. And any questions on this chapter? Okay, let's go ahead and take about a 10-12 minute break. And when we come back, chapter 7